All right, it is 6 o'clock, so I'm calling to order the annual school district meeting and budget hearing of the Wausau School District. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we need to begin by electing a chairperson. So I'd like to ask for nominations for a chairperson for the annual meeting.
Jeff, I'll nominate you to be the chairperson.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Wow. Yeah, I guess so. Nobody else wants it. Are there any other nominations? All right, I will move to close nominations. This requires a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. I am now the chairperson. I will designate Cassie Peck as secretary.
We're going to vote you in as the chairperson first.
Oh, we need to vote. Okay,
Yes.
sorry about that. Okay, so now then the motion. So Cassie, should you probably do this one to vote for? So we need to nominate. Well, right. Okay, now I'll call it. I need a motion to.
So we've got the
To
first
elect-
and the second to elect you as the chairperson, so now we just need to vote on it.
Okay, sorry. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. All right, I will designate Cassie Peck as secretary for this annual meeting. All right, and Bob Test to assist, Cassie Peck and Bob Test to assist in the voting process and to tally votes at this meeting if necessary.
Jeff, can I interrupt you
remember-
to make sure that everybody has signed in that wants to vote?
Has everybody already signed in?
Anybody
I went
out there
around
that
to
lives
board
in the
members
Wausau-
earlier.
Everybody in the room should sign.
If you live in the school district, within the school district boundaries and are a registered voter.
And you're willing to vote. If you don't want to vote, you don't have to sign in.
Good call.
Sorry.
Performance.
Not a problem. Very good.
Sign up for
Thanks,
this.
Jan.
This is what I get. Put that in the paper.
Okay, John's just finishing up there. So the 25th annual meeting minutes that are included in the handout materials will be entered into the record. A motion is not necessary for this. Treasurer Lance Trollope will now read the treasurer's report, which includes the general checking account for the school district. There will be no motion for this as well.
So this is for the general checking account fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018, as of June 30th, 2018. Beginning cash balance and investments as of July 1st, 2017, $30,736,230.78. Receipts, $113,125,209.48. Disbursements, $113,350,134.18. Ending cash balance and investments as of June 30th, 2018, $30,511,306.08. This includes Fund 10, Fund 21, Fund 27, Fund 29, Fund 50, and Fund 80.
All right, are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move on. Noel Tornson will now read the other post-employment benefits report. Again, there is no motion on this.
Cash balance in the OPEB trust account as of June 30th, 2018 was $3,426,949.44. Investment returns July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2018 were negative $33,892.82. Total claim disbursements July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2018 were $1,495,497.12. We also add 5% of all claims are added to the balance each year, so we add another cushion of 5%. Are there any questions at this time?
Thank you, Noel. We will now have the budget hearing on the proposed 2018-2019 budget. This is you, Bob.
Sure. Let me start by starting the slideshow over here. And how about Dr. Hiltz, if I let you maybe kick it off, and then we'll go from there, all right?
Were we agendized that way? Sorry, Bert?
Agendize to do the annual meeting in any format we really want. So only I call on you because that slide right there, the shared key interest that we
Oh,
talked about.
thank you. Yes.
Didn't want to surprise you or anything.
No, sorry about that. We haven't.
My apologies.
We haven't spoken. So in about a week. No, I think what we want to share with the board and the community is that these are the shared key interests that have been developed and have guided our work for many years. And just want to let everybody know that as budget decisions are made, these are some of the driving factors in our budgeting decisions. Really, all I wanted to comment on at that point. Thank you, Bob, for reminding me.
Thank you. Thank you for giving it context and direction. This is something we have seen before, but since this is technically an annual meeting and a budget hearing, we have a slightly different audience right now, even though it may look about the same. This is a meeting that's intended for the community every bit as much as the board. So you might hear some things that are repetitive, but at the same time, if we're, as board members, making policy decisions and high-level decisions on finance and budgeting, we should understand the state funding system and revenue limits and equalization aid and some of those things. So anytime I get a chance to educate anybody who's around me on any of those issues, I take them up on that opportunity. School funding simplified, you've seen this little chart before. The full revenue limit is made up of the levy and how much we get from the state in aid. And if we get more in aid, we have to levy more. Get less in aid, or less in aid, we levy less, or more rather. Sorry. Per pupil amount, it can be boiled down to this. For each student, we spend about $10,594 inside of our revenue limit. Now, our revenue limit represents about 90% of our revenue. Outside of that, we've got a lot of grants, and we've got other funds, investment, fees that we charge, rental, things like that. But 90%, probably a little bit more than 90% is inside the revenue limit. So that makes up about $10,500 per student. If we take off how much is funded by the state, $6.8 thousand, which is about 64% this year, we're left with what we have to levy our residents. Now, this is going to get a lot of attention this year. One candidate for governor is talking about restoring 2/3 funding for schools. So if you hear the restoration of 2/3 funding for schools, which is getting kind of old, it hasn't been done for probably 10 or 15 years. The state kind of deviated from that promise, but one candidate is bringing that back, so it will be a campaign issue. Now, I will assure you that the method I use to come up with 64 versus 36% will not be what they agree to, because that percent can be calculated dozens of different ways. As a matter of fact, right now, there might be people out there saying they already offer 66% funding because of this, the property tax school levy credit is sometimes called school spendable aid, when we know it's not. It's just property tax relief. So if you look at your property tax form, it will say school tax levy credit. And you might get $1,000, $2,000 in school tax levy credit. That's not money that we can spend. But some people will pile that on to make it look like the state is supporting schools with 66%. So there are a lot of different ways you can calculate it, but it's sure to be a campaign issue this year, so at least you'll have a little bit of a background knowledge. We've got about 64% of our revenue limit comes from the state. This is an extremely important graph in my opinion. This is what has happened recently, the last 10 or 12 years. And if we go back further, before 2006, that same trend existed. We can go back to probably 1990. or 93 at least, and it's probably right around 2.86% annualized growth in revenue limit. And then Act 10 happened and our revenue limit went down 5.27. And since then, it's recovering. But think about how long it took to get back to that point. That exact bar graph in 2010 or 11, we first achieved that last year. So it took us until last year to get that same amount of revenue limit combined with the black up there, which is per pupil categorical aid, which is slowly replacing the revenue limit, because everybody gets it, but it's taken a little while to recover. And when you think about things that we want to go up more than 1.33%, we want salary to go up faster than 1.33%. We don't want our benefits to go up any more rapidly as long as we give the same benefit. The cost, we'd love to have it flat, but the truth is, healthcare trend is 6 or 8%. So that's going up faster. We start talking about utilities and cost to build buildings and maintain buildings and all the things that go up greater than 1.33% get to be more and more of a challenge every year. And it's obvious why that's a challenge when you look at a graph like this. Estimated change in revenue limit. This is a perpetual math problem. This is fun to be in the middle of for me. The revenue limit is just a math problem that builds on itself every single year. In 2017-18, our maximum revenue per member, just means per student, was $10,238. To that, we added some exemptions. Some are called recurring exemptions, some are non-recurring exemptions. Recurring exemptions stick. Non-recurring exemptions go away. $11 is the recurring exemption that's stuck. That's called a transfer of service exemption. When a high-cost student moves into the district, in particular, a special ed student moves into the district, in most cases, those are costs that come our way, and we can increase our revenue limit. We capture those costs, and those exemptions stay with us. Some non-recurring exemptions, the exemption to revenue limit, an exemption just means we're upping our revenue limit. The exemption for revenue limit for voucher students. Last year it was $601,000. So $601,000 was the amount that we are able to levy in addition to our regular revenue limit to pay for those vouchers. That's non-recurring. It went away. Another non-recurring exemption, you hear the word exemption when we talk about RLE, revenue limit exemption, for EEE, energy efficiency exemption. All the energy efficiency projects that you've approved over the last 5 years, those go away. They're non-recurring. Declining enrollment exemption, those go away. Now, all of these go away, but some of them come back. So they go away and they come back. But $11 is all that sticks. So now we've got a slightly higher revenue limit going into 18-19. Again, this is the perpetual math problem. This next box used to get a lot of attention. That's the allowable increase per pupil. The state said you can increase it $100 per pupil, or $200, or $275. That's not for a very interesting math problem when you add 0. And you're still at $10,249. Now to that, you add all these exemptions. Some of them will be recurring again, $10 worth. Some of them will be non-recurring, $335. That will go away again next year, but they may come back. The energy efficiency exemption, for example, you authorized 2 years ago and 4 years ago by borrowing $10 million and $9.99 million to exceed the revenue limit each year until it's paid off. So you already gave that authority. Each year we're presented with the same opportunity to tax for the $601,000 for the vouchers. It shows up in our revenue limit formula on October 15th. So 335 is the anticipated non-recurrent exemption, but I'm assuming the vouchers stay the same. I'm assuming the late open enrollment people stay the same. I'm assuming our debt schedule is the same as what we proposed it was going to be for the energy efficiency work. So this is now our new revenue limit, $10,594. So it did go up a little bit. Since we have fewer students, it's also down. That's just a per pupil amount. This one we have probably seen before. Up on top is just a reminder of what makes up the revenue limit. This is still not final, because the state of Wisconsin will give us final values on October 1st, right around the corner, but they tell us the percent with which we need to break up our tax bill. So we get our tax bill, and the state of Wisconsin says 60% to Wausau, 1.7% to Berlin, Hewitt, 1.25%, and so forth. So we don't have that decision to make. That's a decision that's made by the Department of Revenue. Those in this room, including the electorate, get a chance at least to vote on this part. This is the dollar amount of the levy. General fund, this is wrong. It will change. Between now and the end of October, when you get final approval on it, we don't know how much it's wrong and which direction, but it's going to change. Because our pupil count was just done last Friday. State aid numbers come in October 15th. There's some other exemptions, like the voucher exemption will be disclosed on October 15th also. This general fund levy amount will change. That's an approximation. Debt service will be real close to, if not that exact number. We know what our debt schedule is. We know that baked into that is an opportunity to defease debt. In other words, tackle some of our debt payments in the future, in this year, because there's an affordability. The community service levy will not change. Well, it'll change by a penny probably. I have to adjust these by a cent to make the numbers work out. So that community service levy, I believe, is the same number as we've had for 4 or 5 years. Increase 2.6, but what dilutes that is the property value going up 4.02. So in the district, the property value is going up 4.02. This is a very messy slide when you look at it in board book, because the transitions aren't in there. I think if you're going to make decisions on policy affecting school spending, or if you're going to be involved in the debate that's going on statewide with school funding and equalization aid, you'd be foolish not to understand the equalization formula. So it's my attempt every year to update the numbers, let us know where we stand on these two different continuum, and hopefully bring everybody to a little bit better understanding of equalization aid. This will also get a lot of attention in the next several months with the election, and also the Blue Ribbon Commission on school funding. They're talking about this almost exclusively. And its inherent beauty is not lost on me, the funding formula. And a lot of people are with me that it just needs proper funding amounts. The funding formula may not be as broke as people think it is, but it's not funded with an adequate dollar amount. The state of Wisconsin tries to measure every district on its ability to pay for its schools. So every district in Wisconsin lands on this continuum per member, district valuation, and the argument often is that's not a very good measure on a district's ability to pay for schools. Why don't we talk about personal income tax? Why don't we talk about some other things, maybe the demographics of the students themselves? Doesn't work into it. It's just property value per student. And we're not talking about the property value of the district itself, the buildings, the schools. It's the property value of the whole district and all the businesses and homes in it. $4.5 billion or whatever, split up by the number of students. We've got wealthy students on this end of the continuum. We've got wealthy schools on this end of the continuum, poorer schools on this end of the continuum. Right or wrong, that's how the state of Wisconsin measures it. There's another dimension, again on a per pupil amount, district spending. That's a measure of how much the district spends. So the whole funding formula is based on how wealthy a district is and how much they spend. If you live over here, you are a wealthy district that spends very little. The state's formula will suggest you don't need any state money. You're a wealthy district and you don't spend any of it. Over here, poor district that spends little. The state would also say you don't get a lot of money. You don't spend enough to get a lot of money. If you live up here, you probably get the most state money. You are a poor district that spends high. And spending comes with aid. The more you spend, the more aid you get, usually. Everybody lives somewhere in the mix. These three separators on the x-axis seem arbitrary. They're not. This is the average of all the wealth in Wisconsin, property value, split up by all the students in Wisconsin. So if we're going to take all the property value in Wisconsin, split it up amongst all the students, each student would get $573,000 worth of property value. So that's the average. This is static and it's set in statute. This is the end result of another fun math problem. This slides back and forth just to end up spending the last dollar of the appropriation. Okay, so they adjust that from year to year based on the appropriation. Last year, I might have joked, I said over here are below average wealth districts. On the continuum between here and here are above average wealth districts. These are extremely wealthy districts, and these were like uber wealthy districts. Very wealthy districts live to the right of $1.9 million per student, and as a result, they don't get a lot of aid. The separators on the vertical axis are different types of spending. The first $1,000 we spend per student is called primary aid. The next $86.19 between 1,000 and 9,619 is secondary spending, and above that is tertiary spending. This is an interesting number. You'll hear this one debated a lot. There's a push to move that to the average of the state. Right now it's at 90% of the average. So the average spending per state is about $10,700. So again, this is the first $1,000 you spend on a student that obviously everybody needs to spend. This is the next $8,600, still below average, and anything above that is called tertiary spending.
And what happens to us if they move that to 10,000, to the average?
If they move that to 10,000, it will just entitle us to more secondary funding, which you'll see in a little while will help us because we are a positive tertiary funded school district. I'll maybe point that out in a little bit. So all these different blocks make up the different type of spending. And it'll become obvious what secondary and tertiary mean when I highlight some of the lower primary. But that's where the Wausau School District lives right now. If we draw a dashed line down and put the number there, we're at $444,000 per student of property value. We are below average in the state's opinion for our property value, wealth, and ability to fund schools. Now that can fluctuate greatly. Forgetting property value, just talking about number of students. What happens if a bunch of students leave? In the state's opinion, we just got wealthier because per student we have more wealth. So you see how that works against you or for you. Again, the farther you live to the right, the more funding you're going to get, or the less funding you're going to get because you're wealthier. Horizontally, dashed line takes us to 11,123. I said before the average is 10,700. So we are an above average spending district. And districts that are in positive tertiary funding, districts down here, are more encouraged to spend more. Districts that are wealthy are less encouraged to spend more. So for primary funding alone, if we just look at the primary funding, if we take 444,846 as a percentage of 1.9 million, it's 23%. It's pretty easy to just look at the boxes. This is locally funded, this is state funded. So for every student, we fund $230, the state funds $770. And you can see, as that dashed line moves to the right, you'd be wealthier, you'd have more of an expectation to fund it locally, less aid. That's actually holding true for not only the primary funding, it happens in secondary funding as well. If we take that percent of this number, 38% of that dollar amount, 38% of 8619, we fund locally. 62% is funded through the state funding formula. Again, you can see if that dashed line moves to the right, this is a big box. We lose a lot of funding, right? This one's probably the most interesting one. Since we live above this line, we've got a 78% of that dollar amount is locally funded, 22% is state funded. Think what happens if that dashed line moves to the right, if it gets right to this point. That means your tertiary funding would all be locally funded. You'd get aid on the first 1,000, you'd get aid on the next 8,619, but you wouldn't get aid on anything else. Would you be encouraged to spend more and more and more? For maybe other reasons, but not for state aid reasons. Now let's take it to an extreme beyond. What if your dashed line were over here? Think about the dashed line moving. This is a 22%. Moves, 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 moves. It gets to 0. What happens if it moves to the right? Turns into a negative. So that negative means you're taking away from your secondary funding Because the state not only isn't giving you funding, they're taking away funding. That's called negative tertiary aid. And that happens to districts that are wealthier than the average. If you're wealthier than the average, that's the territory in which you live. You're not quite as encouraged to go to referendum, because every dollar of spending in a referendum is costing your local taxpayers maybe $1.10 or $1.05. For us, for every dollar worth of spending, it's only costing us 78 cents, because we're getting 8 on 22 cents. So it's extremely important that we live in positive tertiary funding. It's important to understand that. And to your point earlier, what would happen if this secondary cost ceiling crept up a little bit? There'd be more of this green box and less of this pink one. And the green box is where most of the funding occurs, because it's such a wide range. So that would work in our favor.
Now the mill rates on those wealthy districts, even if they're getting less state aid, though, their mill rates aren't necessarily any worse because their property values are so much higher.
Their mill
Right.
rates, if you can go on the deep behind, this is all available. It's kind of fascinating if you're really looking at some of them. Pick your favorite northern Wisconsin lake community or Door County or some of the communities that you know are property rich, and you start looking at where they land, and they're out here and they'll have mill rates of $1.59 or $2.50, or we're talking about mill rates of $9, $10, $11. They're so property rich that their mill rate is low because so many dollars are exposed to that small mill rate. In a lot of cases, they have small school districts too. So they just don't have a budget that needs to have such a huge mill rate. It doesn't always mean that dollar-wise they're not paying a lot. You've got $1 million property and your mill rate's 1.5 cents versus a $100,000 property and your mill rate's $10.50. Right, you're paying the same amount. So but those mill rates they're crazy when you look in some of these other districts. But this is fascinating stuff, and it'll be part of the debate this year. So it's good to just know a little bit more about it. Fascinating for me.
It's fun, Bob.
You
Any
explained it
questions
well.
on that last one before we leave it? If you want the animated version of this, just send me an email. I'll send it to you. Do the animations. I know yours looks a little cluttered, but I try to stagger them so you can see them all at the same time. This is something that you'll get a chance, if you're in the room, to vote on later on. We're going to vote on total revenues. We're going to vote on total expenses. We're going to vote on the levy. We're going to take a look at the mill rate. We don't vote on the mill rate because it's so much in flux yet. We don't know about it until October 15th. We'll suggest what the mill rate's going to be. But here are our revenues, and you'll look at revenues did go up. Okay, they went up 2.4 million, and most of that is this per pupil adjustment aid. We know that per pupil adjustment aid is where the state of Wisconsin put all additional spending, or a lot of the additional spending. It went up $204 per student. So for every student, went up $204. That's the big one. There is a pretty decent jump in equalization aid also. That's because of favorable treatment by the formula you just saw a little while ago. Plus a little bit more money was dumped into that for this budget at the state level. Here are the expenditures. The expenditures didn't go up quite as much as the revenue. You'll recall last year we had an unbalanced budget. And the reason we had an unbalanced budget is because we spent a lot of money out of fund balance for our scoreboard project. And you would think, well, this year the revenue went up. Well, a lot of that revenue was also received last year because people paid their entire contract all in 1 year. So you saw a little bit of a disparity last year between revenue and expenses. They were not balanced from the start. They were never meant to be balanced. So that's why this expenditure amount went up less than the revenue. This year they are balanced for the first time in recent memory. I don't remember the last time our expenditures and revenues were indeed balanced. This is a pair of numbers that get a lot of attention. That's that split between salary benefits and non-salary benefits, that 80-20 split we refer to regularly. If someone from Line Tech came in here and said, you're crazy for spending that much money on personnel. Well, we're a school district. We don't manufacture a lot of stuff. We use human capital to grow human capital and others, and our expenditures for salary benefits are usually pretty high. 80-20 is pretty close to what you'll see in other districts. I don't know if that's your experience up in Ashland. It's pretty close. We do have a lot of grants. These are not covered under the revenue limit, In Fund 10 alone, we have $5.4 million in grants, and $2.1 million in Fund 27 and $800,000 elsewhere. And these are really easy to budget for usually after the grant is received, because it's all in and out. You're saying in the budget exactly what you're gonna spend that money on. So you get grant money, you spend the grant money on exactly what you said you were gonna spend it on. The difficult part, which you have seen, especially with the Habits grant, and maybe some of these others, is the sustainability element. Every time you accept grant money, you accept it with the knowledge that you're gonna do your best to sustain it. And you've got a decision to either sustain it or make some other tough decisions when the grant money goes away. But every grant offering organization or decision-making body always wants to hear about your ability to sustain whatever they're funding going forward. They don't want to give money knowing that it will just stop. They want some local effort. So these are the grants and dollar amounts. This one is a portion that's more statutorily compliance-driven. We've gone through 3 phases of energy efficiency work. The first phase, we taxed and spent $1.6 million. We didn't borrow any money to do it. So our statutory compliance was limited. We didn't have to come back to the annual meeting and talk about it every year. Phase 2, we borrowed $10 million. So we borrowed $10 million, so the full cost was $11.512 million. And we tackled a lot of roofs and building envelopes and lighting projects, HVAC, and we saved more than the $11 million over the course of paying back this loan. Of that savings, the $46,000 is important to point out, because the $46,000 is the utility savings. And the law states that you have to take those utility savings, take it out of your utility budget and put it in your debt retirement budget. So we can't levy the full amount to retire that debt. We have to subsidize it from our utility budget in the amount of $46,177. Nexus is our performance contractor. They do all the measurements for us. We hired them a number of years ago. We went through a full vetting process to arrive at them, and we've stayed with them since. And here is a glimpse at what we've done with some of our budgets over the last 9 years. Buildings and grounds operations budget. That's not the capital projects you look at every year, but just operations to keep the district up and running every day, went down 8% over the last 9 years. Our capital improvement budgets, you recognize this number, I'm sure Larry does, $1,008,400. We see it every year. That's that capital projects budget that also went down 16% during that time. Utilities went down 31% in those 9 years. So you start thinking about, how can we afford salary increases? How can we afford other things that do go up in cost? How can we afford solid benefit package? Here's another reason. Our buildings and grounds are being run so efficiently, and we're taking advantage of some of the tools. We're taking advantage of referendum. We're taking advantage of energy efficiency exemption. Here's phase 3 of the energy efficiency exemption. You'll see a lot of blank space up here because we're still in the midst of it. Phase 3, we borrowed $9.99 million a couple years ago to do about $11.6 million worth of work, because we paid to finance the money, issue bonds. You will see this one fill in a little bit more next year. Which brings us to an update on how phase 3 is closing out. And it's important to understand, we've got great news. And our total projects were under budget by $1.7 million. Under budget mean under the amount that we issued bonds in the name of, 9.99. We had some contingency going in. We were expecting 5% contingency. That's pretty typical for building projects. We also had some owner discretion, and we had additional contingency generated of $1.0 million. $1.7 million that we can apply to already identified by the board phase 3 energy efficiency projects. We did that with Nexus's hard work in modifying the scope without changing the energy improvements and the energy cost savings. Larry's hard work with Nexus's collaboration on competitive bidding. It's amazing to think about how different of a position we'd be found in right now if we were initiating these projects right now and going to referendum right now. We are so lucky. We're so lucky that the board was progressive, administration, Larry Seiler and his team, Nexus came along at the right time, You think about what the construction world has done over the last 4 or 5 years. We passed a $29 million referendum. Of that, I think $4 million was deferred maintenance. We built tech ed facilities at both high schools. We added on early learning centers at 4 of our elementary schools. A year later, or during the same year, we issued $10 million in bonds for energy efficiency improvements. Roofs, windows, HVAC, lighting improvements. 2 years later, another $10 million, phase 3, just short of $10 million. That's 29, 39, 49, that's over $50 million worth of work if you include phase 1. And our mill rate has gone down since then. We would never be able to do that right now. First of all, because the energy efficiency law doesn't exist anymore. So I give you credit for being as proactive and taking advantage of that tool while you could. But what has happened in the construction world? It's gotten very expensive. The labor market in particular.
Ridiculous.
Tariffs, labor market, there are a lot of things that have changed in the construction world. We couldn't have timed this better. Give you credit for doing that.
Yeah. We have to give you credit for
Yeah, we
bringing
do.
it to
Yes.
us.
Give us credit
good
for
guidance.
agreeing to
With
what
you.
you recommended to us.
I'll take that. All right. So I reminded you a little while ago, the resolution language that you passed already includes the projects that we're gonna tackle with the 1.7 million in regards to, under the building envelope category, a roofing project in Horace Mann. There's really no way we could do that without a referendum. This was perfectly timed for that reason. Fiber build out at additional schools. There are 3 or 4 schools, John?
Yep.
That we're gonna add fiber runs to, that were in the original RLE scope of work. Now we can afford them, and other potential energy upgrades. We have some smaller things that are light on engineering and easy to pull the trigger on. A lot of LED lighting upgrades in particular that we can do to round out and spend the last dollar of our RLE funding. Here's another statutory compliance. We have to talk about what we're spending our community service fund levy on. We levy an amount, $487,000, whatever it was in the last one. It hasn't changed for 4 years. The biggest program is our Growing Great Minds. Nancy Cedar's here tonight, okay? She'd be more than willing to answer any questions if you have them. But this is our before and after school, out of school program. And we have to offer it to the entire community, or we can't use community generated levy for it. The DPI is heavily scrutinizing this again. So we'll have to go through our decision tree, our flow chart, test matrix to see if we're still allowed to levy for that program. We also have the planetarium program at Wausau West that is community-wide. It's not just a school district resource. And also through the technology department, we're offering learning opportunities for adult residents to learn about technology. And that's also included.
I'm sorry, I just don't want to misperceive something. Are you saying that there's the possibility that the G2M program is at risk for continuing?
I think we're really safe on that one. I got a sneak peek at the flow chart the DPI was considering a couple of weeks ago, and I real casually went through it, and I think we're on pretty stable ground. And there will be a need to increase that levy over the next couple of years because some of our grant programming at some of our sites is starting to run out. And at the same time, they want us to be self-sustaining. And our plan for being sustainable is with this community service levy. The DPI really got serious about policing this about 5 years ago because there were a few districts statewide that were taking advantage of it. When that happened, we didn't change a thing. And we didn't get penalized. Our auditors agreed, the DPI agreed that we're using Fund 80 for what we're supposed to be using it for. As a matter of fact, throughout the next several months, I want to look at maybe leveraging Fund 80 even to a greater degree. Are there things right now that we're funding in Fund 10 that we could fund in Fund 80? We have to take a real close look at what the DPI put out in that flow chart and see if there are existing expenses. The one that came to mind right away was SROs, but I was told no on the SROs, but at least those are the types of things that I'm thinking of.
And I think we need to do a shout out about the planetarium. I don't know if any of the board members have not seen it since it's been updated.
It's great.
It is state of the art, and if you have not seen it, you need to make a trip. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Bob, on the community-based technology training, how are we doing that on that in terms of attracting community members, Ed?
I'll have to turn it over to someone that has
John or-
oversight on those funds. Is that something with
The
the
community-based,
mall
yeah.
opportunity, the mall?
Yeah, so last year we offered a number of sessions at the mall for drop-in. Our most successful time was partnering with the Y. And Becky Zalant would bring a group of individuals over to the mall twice a month. And this year again, Laura and Melissa are back in contact with Becky and developing a series of programs for those individuals to come in. A lot of it was centered around they would bring in their smartphones and devices, and we would help them with Facebook or social media or address books or those kinds of things.
Okay. And you're comfortable with the participation rates? I think it's...
Yeah, it's we would love to have more. 12 people and 2 people trying to help out and address with the intricacies of each person's individual device is pretty good, or we'd have to increase the amount of staff to help out.
Here are the numbers associated with our community service fund, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Nancy, but you'll notice there's a large carryover, and that's all intentional. That is all part of a strategy to get ready for some of the grant funding drying up. So that's all part of the strategy, and Nancy and I have talked about this, and the 487.2, the levy that we've had for 3 or 4 years, we will almost certainly need to increase that this year, especially if we find other things to bring into Fund 80. But even if we fail to find anything else to bring into Fund 80, we're gonna need to increase that.
And I could just say that Thomas Jefferson's grant ended at the end of last year, so they are operating this year under Fund 80. Lincoln is ending at the end of this school year, and we've had conversations about that. It's had many cycles of grant funding, and with the goal of sustainability, I think it's time for us to take that one under our wing as well. So that would not be this year, that would be next year. And Franklin is ending. That's the program run by the Boys and Girls Club, and so some decisions will need to be made about that. They're early on. They've only had 5 years of programming, so they could potentially reapply.
I can't miss this opportunity, right? Here's our mill rate projected this year, of course. We don't know what it's gonna be until October 15th, but this is as low as it's been since 2009, at least projected. $10.97, I believe it is. Here are all the numbers that are associated with the levy that everybody in the room will be able to vote on later on. The general fund levy went down a little bit. Remember, the revenue limit went down a little bit, but aid went way up, right? So the general fund levy went down. The debt service levy went up. Why did the debt service levy go up? Because of defeasance. And we took an opportunity last year to move our debt service levy up a certain amount, and we're doing double down on that this year. So our mill rate's still going down, but we're prepaying some debt and saving hundreds of thousands of dollars in doing that. So that's why that debt service levy has gone up. Our community service levy stayed exactly the same. Overall, our levy did go up 2.6%, but remember our property value went up 4%. So our mill rate will go down. If those numbers hold true, we know that it's just an estimate at this point. Total levy, again, down here, up 2.6, property value 402, so the levy, or the mill rate change should go down about 15 cents. There's some years that we're really off on that. There's some years that we're a little bit closer. I remember the year that vouchers were created and everybody was left wondering how many vouchers you're gonna have in any district. That's stabilized a little bit. It is creeping up every year. I believe it was in the $400-something thousand range last year. It's 601, or 2 years ago, it was 601,000 last year.
And how does it show up on the tax bill?
As of right now, there's no obligation for it to show up in the tax bill. That's why when we set the levy in the end of October, I'm gonna make sure I take every opportunity in this room to talk about it, and I suggest you all do the same. There's still a little bit of a fight going on whether it belongs on the tax bill or not. I think in the name of transparency, it should show up in the tax bill.
Sure.
So it comes in and it goes right back out.
Comes into us. The phrase I use is we always get the pleasure of taxing for it, but none of the enjoyment of actually spending it. So we're the bad guys by having an elevated tax rate, $600,000 more than it would have been, and we don't get to spend any of it. Just comes off of our last aid payment. We don't have to send them a check or anything like that. At least they just have the decency of subtracting it from what they owe us. Here's just a short-term historical look at our recent mill rate. 11.46, that was right after the referendum. So it went up, and we've already gone to the spot we were at before the referendum and lower. I think it was 11.14 before the referendum. So it went up expectedly so, and then with more spending, because more aid, we knew that when we passed the referendum, and that's how we got back down. Here are the different individual influences on that mill rate. Last year it was $11.12. Increase in property value, that was a big mover. Increase in general aid, that was a big mover. Decrease in revenue limit, that moved the needle a little bit. Increase in Fund 38, that's just our energy efficiency debt retirement schedule, just went up a little bit, it was natural. Fund 39 debt, that's defeasance, that's a pretty big one, and then these two are pretty small. Membership enrollment, which is still yet to be determined. We did the count on Friday, but it all has to go through the DPI and come back to us on the revenue limit worksheet, so we'll find out about that one. 1097. There's much more information. There's an entire budget booklet in board book. I also like to thank Noel Tordenson, who's here with me. Larry Seiler played a big role in the budget, and this whole team's sitting here with me. So compliments to everybody.
All right, thank you very much, Bob. Are there any additional questions? The next items in the agenda are old business. There is no old business. The new business is a set of 8 resolutions. And I'll read out the motion. I'll look for a movement, and then I'll look for a second. In the case where we don't have a specific amount, such as in the salaries for board members, of course, we'll be looking for someone to make that. Motion with an amount in mind, and then we can discuss that and see where we end up. The most recent, as you all saw, advice from Wausau is that we're allowed to discuss, we're allowed to vote. If anybody feels that they can't do that, of course they can abstain, and we can talk further about that at some point, but that's where we are in terms of our legal advice at the moment. So let's go from the top, and you've got the slides, Bob? Good. All right, the first one is the tax levy for general fund and community service fund. So I'm looking for a motion that the amount of $29,746,176 be adopted as the tax levy for the general fund and $487,200 for the community service fund for the 2018-2019 school fiscal year. I'm looking for a motion.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion? Call the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Sorry, I don't vote on these. So
Yeah, but
X
everybody
mine
out
out.
here can vote.
Everybody else in the whole room can vote.
If you've signed up.
With enthusiasm.
I'll curb my enthusiasm. Here, so the second, tax levy for debt service fund, including all long-term debt. I'm looking for a motion that the amount of $15,056,215 be adopted as the tax levy for the debt service fund for the 2018-2019 school fiscal year.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Number 3, school lunches. I'm looking for a motion to furnish school lunches to the students of the school district and appropriate funds for that purpose. The school lunch program is self-funded through the sale of tickets and federal and state subsidies and is accounted for in Fund 50.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Number 4, reimbursement of expenses for school board members. So I'm looking for a motion to authorize the payment of actual and necessary expenses of a school board member when traveling in the performance of duties.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 5, salary for school board members. School board members have received an annual salary of $3,100 since 2005. There's not been a raise since that time. I'm looking for a motion, and with that, a dollar figure to establish for the 2018-2019 school fiscal year.
I will make a motion that we raise our salary to be commensurate with what the county board gets to $3,900, which of course is open for discussion.
It would take a second to continue forward with the consideration. Okay, so we have a first and a second. Discussion.
I will start. I've been looking into what other boards in the area make, and school boards are notoriously low paid. And when we only seek to compare ourselves to other school boards, yes, it's apples to apples, but comparing to other boards in the area, it's like Max to Cortland's, not much difference. We're elected, we basically all do the same work. And when you look at the budgets, Marathon County's budget is $160 million. They use 0.18% of that for salaries, if I got that right. No, 0.15%. No, let me look at this. I should just read it because otherwise I'll wander around here. Okay, in Marathon County, when we look at the annual budgets for the city of Wausau and the county board, the city and the county board use 0.18% and 0.15% respectively to pay their boards. The Wausau School District uses 0.028%, which is approximately 1/6 of what the other boards use. The math shows that if the school board mirrored the other local boards, they would be paid $18,000 a year, or $16,555, which I am not proposing, obviously. If the comparison is board member to board member, the pay would translate to $17,000 a year, for the city, and the county pay would translate to $3,900, which is where I got the money, the amount that I put forward. We do good work. We have not received a pay adjustment for 13 years. It's a minute part of the budget, and it shows, I think, when we look at that we're taking 1/6 of our budget to pay our board members, it shows that we don't value our work very much. And I feel free to speak out because I am on a duty disability. I was injured as a correctional officer many years ago, and if I earn money, 40% of my money goes back to the state. So it's not going to make that big a difference to me. I just think that the board deserves to be valued better. And the county board takes a $100 raise every year. It's set like at 2%, and I think we should do a pay adjustment this year with an annual tying it to what we offer our rest of our employees.
Do you know what the meeting schedule is as far as what's comparatively to us? I know our committees are committees of the whole, so we're all expected to go to them, but how does that compare to what the county or the city is required to do?
The county, my husband is on the county board. He goes to an informational meeting and then the monthly meeting. There are very few trips. Since he's been on the board, he took one trip to look at the roads in the area. City council, and Mary could probably speak to this better, but my council person told me she goes to 12 meetings a month, but I don't know if that's including ribbon cutting, and like we go to schools, and it's not just board meetings, it's everything else too.
Yeah, there's committee meetings, and then there's committee of the whole meetings, and then there's common council, and then everything outside of that, which involves in the community to attend. But it's really up to the council member to see how active they want to be.
Yeah, it's kind of like us with our school visits.
Yeah. I want to say you're very courageous, Jane, for bringing this up. and I can only speak for myself, but I don't think I can agree with increasing the board compensation from 3,100 to 3,900 is what you're recommending.
Well, with leaving it open to,
I for myself, I would feel so guilty because there's so many decisions we make about teacher compensation, and I wouldn't be able to accept the additional increase. But
you're
that's just
always,
me.
your board members are always free to donate their wages back. I'm just saying that there shows little value with keeping the pay rate as flat as it's been all these years.
Well, one thing I will say, and I think that public service is about service and not about the dollars. And I think that we can't compare city council and county board and school board. And I think that we have a unique situation in that we're educating the future. And when we have teachers that have the compensation issues, and when we have vulnerable students in our schools, students that suffer from food insecurity and lack of hygiene products and things like that, and we aren't always helping all those students that we could be, I don't see how a raise for the board would be appropriate.
I think it's an important issue, but I too would be waiting until we get more funding.
That's not, I guess, you know, if you want to be martyrs to the cause, that's fine. But I just think it really shows what we're valued at by having the pay so extremely low. They have budget problems for the city. They have budget problems for the county. I mean, the board president for the county makes $30,000 a year, which I feel is horrendously out of line. But I don't think a bump for us, even if it's just $100, and then there's an adjustment every year for what we pay our rest of our staff. But it should be something. It just seems like since 2005, there's no value placed on us. School board members are kind of laughing stock of the elected world. When you go to events, they will announce the city council people and they will announce the county board people, and unless Mary's there, the school board members are never recognized. And I think we do it to ourselves, and if we don't stand up and speak up for ourselves, then I guess we deserve it.
Well, I think we're doing important work, and
I'm not saying we aren't doing important work,
No,
I'm saying
but-
we aren't being recognized.
Well, I'm never very good about money, so I guess the only thing I'm concerned about, now that Lance isn't president anymore, is the amount of work that the president has to do above the other board members. And I guess I would be in favor of adjusting the president's salary a little bit more. The number of letters and the response and the amount of time that that person takes in that position, I just think needs to be considered. It's a lot. I would say it's 50% more work than the rest of us do, just by the way we've designed our board. So that's just my 2 cents about adjustment.
I would agree with that.
And you can always take and put the adjustment off until the following election. So that's what they do a lot of times for like Congress and all the other elected boards. They vote the raise and then it takes effect after the next election.
I don't want to discount the work of the board president, past or present, by any means, but I mean that's been clear. I wouldn't think it would be. I want to choose my words carefully, but it's just that it's public service, and the individuals that choose to step into that role aren't doing that because I get paid a little bit more, but to serve, to take on that role.
Do you think Congress thinks that way?
I'm not concerned about Congress. I'm concerned about the Wausau School Board.
Well, just as a point of order, this is a vote for the entire electorate, which so if someone else feels that they'd like to pitch in, they may, recognizing the awkwardness of that situation. So we have a motion on the floor. Are there amendments to the motion? Some other ideas were brought up, but they weren't brought up as amendments. Are we ready to go?
Well, I will make the amendment that we adjust our pay from 3,100, let's go with 30 to 3,300, with a $500 bump to the presidency.
You would need a second for that, and we'd have to vote on the amendment and then vote on the general motion. Is there a second?
Can you read it one more time, or was it?
Sure. Go ahead, Jane. Repeat
I
it.
was just saying that we would, I can't even remember what I said now,
Okay.
33?
So
We'd
to-
raise our board pay $200, but the president would get an additional $500.
So 3,300 for board members except for the president, which would then be moved to 3,700. And so there's a motion. For
I will
this
second that.
Okay, there's a second. Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the amendment, we will vote again
I'm
later
sorry,
on the
Jeff,
original motion.
I'm sorry. Can we do a roll call vote on this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
But it would be the whole
It's for
electorate.
It's the whole.
That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we've had a request for a roll call vote, so that has to be
One grab the
taken
list.
one person at a time. And so again, this is on the amendment to the motion. The general motion that began it all hasn't been answered yet. This is just to amend the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
So
sorry.
you don't want a roll call to amend?
Hold on. Okay, so this was just to vote on the amendment, not to vote on the entire,
Right, just on whether the
Resolution.
motion itself has been amended,
okay.
because we had a second on the original.
Then I take back my roll call
Okay.
for the
Okay, so there's
amendment.
no request for the roll call. Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Me?
You want us to say like, no?
No.
Well, yes, you have to say
Okay.
something.
No. No?
So was that 2 and 2?
I think a hand vote would probably be best.
Let's go to the hand vote. All in favor of the amendment to the motion, raise your hand. So that's 2. All opposed to the amendment, raise your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Abstaining? 2, 3,
Or abstaining.
4 abstaining. Okay, so the motion, the amendment to the motion fails. Now we're back to the original motion. Any more commentary? And it doesn't preclude the option of more amendments. Okay, and now are you requesting a roll call vote for the original motion?
No?
So it's
Sorry,
just
I
the
was-
3,900. Okay, so it's the motion now on the floor, which has been seconded, is a bump in pay to 3,900 for the 2018-2019 budget. This is the original motion.
This is your, oh,
This is
okay.
the original.
Thank you. Sorry.
When you get amendments on amendments on amendments, then it gets really complicated. Okay, and that's where you need a parliamentarian, actually. All right, so the original motion is on the floor, and then there's no request for a roll call?
This is the one that I would like to request a roll call vote
Okay.
on, please.
Okay, so we have a request for a roll call vote.
Jeff Lee,
Abstain.
Jane Rush,
Yes.
Therese Miles,
Abstain.
Beth Martin,
Abstain.
Lance Trollope,
Abstain.
Tricia Zunker,
No.
Lee Webster,
Abstain.
Mary Tao,
No?
Nancy Cedar,
No.
Amy Arlen,
No.
John Udine,
Noel Tortzen,
No.
Larry Seiler,
Nope.
John Winter.
No.
How do you want me, because I signed up too.
You're
I
a
abstain.
vote or you
I
abstain?
There you go. Count him.
No, I just want to
I
send
know,
it.
how is that? Does that show you?
Correct. Do you want to count the abstentions?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay. 1 no, I'm sorry.
1 yes.
1 yes, 8 no, 6 abstentions.
Okay, so the motion fails. We still have to set an amount for the coming year, so.
About 0.
So there's a motion for 0 compensation. Is there a second? Okay, that motion does not advance. We need a motion.
About 3,100.
Okay, 3,100, is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Okay, we'll take that to a vote. Is anyone requesting a roll call vote? Hearing none, we'll go to the voice vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
Abstentions?
How many ayes there were? 3?
I heard 2.
2 ayes, 1 nay.
Cassie, you can put me as an aye. As a yes.
3 ayes.
3 ayes and
nay.
1 nay, and the rest
Abstention or
abstention,
silent?
silence.
Abstention implied.
Motion carries. The salary for school board members for the coming year will be $3,100. Authorized resolution, the next item is the authorized resolution regarding continuing authorization for the Board of Education to lease suitable buildings and/or land for school sites. So I'm looking for a motion pursuant to section 120.10 sub 5 of the Wisconsin statutes that the Board of Education be granted authority through the time of the next annual meeting to lease suitable buildings and/or land for school sites.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Number 7, authorize resolution regarding continuing authorization for the Board of Education to convey partial interests in real estate. So I'm looking for a motion pursuant to section 120.10 sub 12 of the Wisconsin statutes that the Board of Education be granted authority through the time of the next annual meeting to convey small parcels and/or easements in school lands to governmental authorities or public utilities under circumstances in which property belonging to the school district is not needed for school purposes and in which the value of consideration to be received in exchange for an easement does not exceed $20,000. Looking for the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And the final, establish the 2019 annual meeting. Looking for a motion pursuant to state statute 120.08 sub 1 sub A, authorize the Board of Education to establish a date and time for the 2019 annual meeting. This authorizes us to be able to set the date.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries, and of course later we set that date. All right, thank you very much. Motion to adjourn.
So moved. I beat you.
Second.
You got it.
Cassie, figure it out. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone want to abstain or oppose? Didn't think so.